a workshop in Zurich on expanding histories of IHL, and one of the challenges was exactly like looking at other areas of the world, and this for sure the presentation of Ankit for sure contributes to expanding the narratives of the history of IHL. And just to tell you that we will have 20 minutes, each of you will have 20 minutes to present. And so Ankit, the floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
Well, let me begin by thanking the organizers for hosting me, albeit in this online format. I am sure uh, being there present is unsurmountable. In order to contribute to that, I'm put on my favorite tweed as a contribution to being in Scotland or closest to Scotland. With that, I must also apologize to the chair. I'm sorry if this paper does not discuss much of international humanitarian law, but I'll try to discuss matters of international law and international dispute resolution through the history of the Sikh Empire and an interesting facet of that, which I shall not give away right now. Having said all this, let me just share my screen and hope that the slides are visible. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, this is a rather interesting topic and deviates from regular study of history in some sense, sort of legal history, because this topic in this paper discusses the emergence of an empire that is linked by an umbilical cord to a religion, and this religion is essentially the Sikh religion, and the emergence of this religion in the late 18th century with the decline of the Mughal Empire. You'll be able to see on the slides the vast extent of this empire and how it comes across. This, of course, region as we know it today is the region of Punjab. Panj means five, Jab means rivers. So this region is divided by five rivers, which across, of course, spans into four territories, not just India but also Pakistan, China, and also Nepal. So this region is very important, and determination of water is something that we'll discuss as we move forward. But at the height of the Mughal empires, something interesting starts to happen. There are breakaways, and within these breakaways are these tiny Sikh communities which form themselves as confederacies, also known as missals. They continue to resist the invasions and the forces that they've been able to subdue. But while in the initial years of these missions or confederacies, they retained autonomy, but were led by chieftains. These chieftains, and amongst one of those was a tribe which was known as Shukur Chalakia missile, which and the head of this missile was a gentleman called Sardar Mahan Singh, and his son was Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now, Maharaja Ranjit Singh inherited his father's confederacy at a very young age, and within this time frame, the Afghanistanis, also the rulers in Afghanistan, the predominant ruling family and class in Afghanistan, were ruthless rulers. And it was said of them, and at least one of them, in fact, that whatever you consumed belonged to you, and the rest will go to Ahmad Shah Durrani, which was one of the most formidable Afghani rulers of this region. But as time progressed, and I'm going to cover a period of 400 years of history, so do pardon my pace because I do have a lot of ground to cover. But what happens in 1793 to 1798, perhaps this is reference to international humanitarian law insofar as wars are concerned, is that the retreats of the Afghanis starts to take place with the consolidation of the Sikh Empire under the tutelage of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And all this happens in the period from 1799 onwards, and capturing of forts and in territories. And something interesting happens more specifically in March of 1799, because in this, a diamond known as the Kohinoor diamond, which translates to the mountain of light, is transferred into the properties of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And he takes possession of this along with other diamonds and rubies, amongst whom the Timur ruby. And And by this time, in say for instance the 1830s, the early 1820s, Maharaja Ranjit Singh has gathered all these territories that you see on your slide now and expands his controls and enters into different treaties with different players. And these players we shall discuss in a minute. But before moving forward, it is important to understand the breadth of the empire that Maharaja Ranjit Singh had. Maharaja Ranjit Singh went to the Golden Temple, or the Harminder Sahib as we know it, to seek blessings as a token of his devotion, and he vowed to cover the temple in absolute pure gold, which is why it is now known as, in its current day, as the Golden Temple. Now, learning of this, the Nizam of Hyderabad, which was another kingdom, sent donations. Now, perhaps an English understanding or an English interpretation of this time is noted by one Emily Eden in her accounts Up in the Country, written in 1866, and she says, and I quote, "The temple is covered of pure gold, most beautifully carved, completely with gold, most beautifully carved, till within 8 feet from ground. Then there are panels of marble inlaid with flowers and birds. There are 4 large folding doors of gold. We walked round it, and then Ranjit took us in to a sort of a volcano of fireworks and illustrated an illuminated fish which was swimming about the tank. It was the cutest sight, and supposed by those who know Sikhs to be wonderful proof of confidence of Ranjit Singh's part." Ranjit Singh continues to expand his kingdom, and in 1801 he is granted the title of Maharaja, or in other words, the Emperor. However, by 1809, the advent of the British has started to rise, and they sign a treaty of Amritsar, where the Golden Temple is based, recognizing that Ranjit Singh will not expand his empire below the river Satluj. I'll now try to show you Satluj. It should be visible on your slides now. Now, the idea with this was that for Singh to gain the support in these circumstances was important for the East India Company, because if the French invaded, Sikh's intention was to further consolidate his territorial gains to the south of the river of Satluj. After establishing the rivers respective of the border, Singh wanted his to absorb other kingdoms within this region and go beyond the waters. However, the English were not having any of it, because they returned themselves to the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, because this reminded them that they needed Singh as an ally, because his kingdom stood between Russia and India, serving as an ideal buffer state from an attack. However, during the reign of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he issued coins minted in gold, which were known as Nan Sikhis. Maharaja Ranjit Singh also engraved the name of various Sikh gurus on which these coins were inscribed. A shrewd and diplomatic leader, his court was filled with nobles from various regions. A Frenchman called Jean-Francois Allard as his army chief, and another General Ventura who came from Italy. All were tasked and mandated with controlling the army and separate streams of it. Now, going back to a point that I made initially in this paper was a reference to the rivers. Rivers, as we will see now, become an important flashpoint for not just territorial gains, but also the control of territories. During Maharaja Ranjit Singh's reign, the waters were divided on the basis of agricultural lands and ad hoc systems and canals to control these water supplies. However, things were going to change, and changed quickly they did. Because on the frontiers of the Sikh Empire, by 1845, there were sharp and bloody wars. First of all, in the Battle of Sobran, in the First Anglo-Sikh War in 1846. The British feared to annex outright a full region of former soldiers and wished to retain a buffer state and seek as much as is possible. By the Treaty of Lahore, they also took Kashmir and its dependencies of the fertile land of Jalandhar closer to the heart of the Sikh Empire. They also reduced their armies of the opposing sides, and also the sizable cash indemnities that they imposed. The British then sold off Kashmir to the Hindu chief of Gulab Singh and changed his sides at precisely the moments where it was important. and by another treaty of 1846, the treaty signed by Henry Lawrence, after which a famous school is also named in India. This treaty restricted the Sikh army's size and its capabilities, weakening its sovereignty further and further. However, by full annexation of the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1849, the transformation was effectively made. Punjab became the British Empire's protectorate, marking a significant shift in the decline of the Sikh independence and dominance of North India. However, and this is an important fact insofar as cultural heritage is concerned, on the 29th day of March in 1849, during the Second Anglo-Sikh War, there was a treaty or a denunciation made during the Treaty of Lahore that called for the Kohinoor diamond, the precious and the revered Kohinoor diamond, to be surrendered by the Maharaja to the Queen of England. Be that as it may, the impact and the management of water resources is something that I want to return on, because empires come and go, but laws tend to stick around for longer periods of time, and I can attest to that as a lawyer myself. The British, while imposing their colonial policies, also enshrined laws and also regulations to have certain drainage systems established in the country's governance. They do so by different laws, such as the North Indian Canal and Drainage Act of 1873, which, believe it or not, is still in effect. And they also create the Punjab Canal colonies, where the British allocated land and water rights to settlers, often favoring loyalists and reinforcing colonial economic interests. These challenges, of course, had profound socio-economic impacts, altering the landscape of Punjab as we then knew it and as we now know it, and setting the stage for future conflicts over water resources. And that is precisely what tends to happen when such arbitrary denunciations and also literal demarcations are made on land, especially in reference to the Radcliffe Line, which splits the Indus River that we saw at the very beginning. Because in the 1940s, especially 1948, a year after independence, India briefly shuts off its water supplies to Pakistan from Firozpur, and this necessitates a trigger in the bilateral water sharing between both countries. Therefore, what therefore happens after this is that in an inter-dominion conference in May 1948, there's a temporary arrangement made in which is known as the Delhi Agreement. Differences that arose were settled, but in 1949 something even further interesting happens. Pakistan pushes for third-party mediation through the International Court of Justice, which is gaining its recognition. Of course, this is a period before the Southwest African cases. In fact, this is the period where the Kofi Channel cases have been heard, and also the territorial and state responsibility issues have been decided upon, therefore bolstering the credibility and rulings of such nation states. The ICJ has also issued an advisory opinion on reparations on injuries suffered in the service of the United Nations in 1949. There is also a legal authority that is attached to reparations for injustices and fatalities. So, with this background, what I've tried to hope is to give you an understanding as to why the ICJ was considered by Pakistan. Of course, India and Pakistan have been frequent flyers to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, seeking for what one might know as justice, as we now have this conference take place during perhaps one of the most pivotal hearings in the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion on climate change. Of course, climate change becomes a recurring issue for even this issue, because while Pakistan pushes for the International Court of Justice as a mediator, India prefers an ad hoc tribunal instead. And in the discussions thereon, in 1951, the then World Bank President Eugene Black, proposes a cooperative solution to both countries, to the Indus Basin. The genesis of Black's intervention comes as an approach to the World Bank independently made in the 1950s to mediate water sharing disputes over the Indus water system. And by 1952, things are moving forward. The World Bank then proposes to allocate the western rivers of Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab to Pakistan, and the eastern rivers of Ravi, Bias, and Satluj to India, while asserting that India and Pakistan should construct replacement infrastructures for both. And in doing so, where a couple of years pass, and we're now in 1959, wherein under Eugene Black's governance, the Indus Water Basin Development Fund is set up, and in doing so, the Indus Water Treaty is set up in September 1960. It is ratified later in 1961, and the treaty is allocated as per the description made earlier. There is also a commission set up for data exchange, which has now, of course, entered into problems of its own. And that really remains the persistent challenge and contemporary conflict of this circumstance. And in doing so, the importance of the river is highlighted because these cases have now landed up in the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is a body which is governed independently and has no relationship to the other UN bodies, at least on paper. So, all in all, what is important to be referenced is that these recent cases before the court have highlighted these ongoing issues and disputes, and Pakistan's stance is heavily influenced by the dependence on the basin for agriculture and energy. Over 90% of its irrigation relies on water, and making potential disruption as a direct challenge to their threat of food security and economic stability. India, on the other hand, emphasizes the territorial sovereignty and the right to utilize resources within its domain for developmental projects, provided it adheres to the technical and specific requirements of the treaty. These conflicts echo the historical legacies of colonialism and abrupt the partition that failed to address intertwined nature of regions' water resources. In order to conclude, what I would like to share is that the rule of an empire or of an emperor, in this case Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the one eyed emperor as he was known due to suffering an early eye infection which made him lose his eye, is something that expanded to territorial expanses only known by those as marvelous and as great as Napoleon or or the Roman Empire, which is perhaps in some contexts is known as neither Roman nor holy. But of Ranjit Singh, it is said by one of his foreign ministers, Fakir Ezzuddin, that the Maharaja is like the sun, and the sun has only one eye. The splendor and luminosity of his single eye is so much that I have never dared to look into his other eye. End quote. In essence, the history of the Sikh Empire before the British consolidation in India is much more a historical narrative rather as opposed to a source that is insights of leadership, resource management, and the complexities of international affairs. But as we contemplate a future of South Asia and the well being of its people, we must draw inspiration from the past. The waters of the Indus Basin have sustained civilizations for a millennia. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that they constitute to do so for generations to come. And as the International Court of Justice hears pleas such as mine in different contexts and in different circumstances, we must remember that only in solidarity can we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ankit, for that very insightful.